Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. We are going to take a look at Revelation 8 scriptures. Speaking of mountain burning with fire falling into the sea, and that's part of the trumpet judgments. We're going to take a look at that in a second. I found a couple of articles which I think are interesting and add to the general narrative of the last days, the confusion, the fact that people don't trust God. This was an interesting one, and just kind of a humorous one. This is from dailycaller.com. Apparently, the national parks, this is U.S., the National Park Service is quietly removing signs that were saying that the glaciers would all be gone by 2020, and that's after years of heavy snowfall. It's interesting because God's in control. I have no doubt that the temperatures are fluctuating. I absolutely agree. I mean, the data is the data, but what you understand from the data is another question. And scientists, of course, believe that we're in some strange new special time area where the temperature is just going to continually rise. Meanwhile, historically, there have been times in the past when the temperature was a lot warmer. In recorded history, where it was a lot warmer, I don't even have to go back to pre-flood times. And so we have general cycles where the Earth gets warmer and then it gets colder. We're in a minimum solar, not a modern minimum, but a solar minimum right now, which is part and parcel of the cooling that indeed we've seen and the increased snowfall. Glacier National Park quietly removed a visitor sign saying its iconic glaciers will disappear by 2020 due to quote-unquote climate change. Several winters of heavy snowfall threw off the climate model projections that glaciers would all disappear by 2020. So scientists they're looking at a very short time span of data, and I don't know why they're not looking at past historical data, which has shown that the Earth has been a lot warmer in the past. As an example, the forests that used to exist in Greenland, that seems to me like that would be an obvious indicator that, maybe the Earth has been a lot warmer in the past, and it's apparently recovered. But they think the ice sheets will all be gone, and this is some big deal. Ultimately, God's in control, and ultimately, the Earth will burn with fire when God cleanses the Earth. But we're not there yet. We're in just regular cycles of the Earth, the heating and the cooling of the Earth. And this is nothing outside of what God has already planned for the planet. Of course, this is something you're not going to see on mainstream media. It says, a blogger first noticed the signage change and noted other signs warning of impending glacier disappearance had been replaced. So why hasn't the National Park Service come out and explained themselves? Have they changed their tune? I think they would probably come out if they were asked and say, well, we haven't changed our tune, but, well, they were getting old. The signs were getting old or something. It's astounding. And, of course, the liberal, lefty, mainstream media isn't going to report on this. Not going to report that climate change hasn't actually worked out the way they thought it would. They just won't report on it. They'll be quiet about it, but they'll never admit that they were wrong on it. It says, as it turns out, higher than average snowfall in recent years upended the computer projections from the early 2000s that National Park Service based its claim that glaciers would all be gone by 2020. So it says glacier retreat in Glacier National Park speeds and slows down due to fluctuations in climate. And that's an accurate statement. So pretty fascinating stuff. Those signs were based on observation prior to 2010 that glaciers were shrinking more quickly than the computer model suggested. Subsequently, larger than average snowfall on over several winters slowed down that retreat rate, and the 2020 date used by NPS display does not apply anymore. So how many people were confused and misled by these things by apparent scientists, and they believe that they would be gone by 2020 when these scientists should have recognized that there's fluctuations all the time. They go up, they go down. You really can't say a whole lot until you're a lot farther along, until you have 30, 40, 50 years of data, and then maybe you can reach some assumptions about what's going to happen. But these were based on, I think, very flawed outtake from the data and short-term data collection as well, relatively so. Here's another story. This is from haaretz.com. I think this is interesting. The alliances keep shifting, and we see Russia continually in the headlines as a lead country. Says there's a new alliance in the Middle East. Russia, the United States, and Israel are uniting against Iran, making it clear that Bashar Assad, who will determine the future of the region. So it's not up to Bashar Assad anymore. Now apparently it's between Israel, United States, and Russia. And we know Russia is a big player in the end times. In Ezekiel 38, they fire up their alliance with Iran and Turkey and Ethiopia and other countries there, and they turn back. And the Bible says that there's hooks in the jaws that turn Russia back. So while it looks like Russia is cooperating right now, they're not preventing Israel from airstrikes. There will be a time when they're turned back, and they will turn against Israel and invade Israel with the alliance of nations there spoken of in Ezekiel 38. And interestingly, there is no United States in there. So I think Russia's playing very strategically. They're staying on the side of the United States and Israel. Well, in fact, playing both sides really right now, until the time when its geopolitical goals come into focus, and they turn against the United States and Israel. Probably when the United States disappears, and then Russia will feel they have the ability, the power, and no restrictions, basically, to go into Israel and march along with Iran and other allied nations. Now, the question is, when and how is the United States removed from world superpower status? And that's really the big question that's happening right now. And I've continued to submit that, in fact, it's an economic collapse that ends up causing all this. And I think that is still on the books. It's still coming. We're in now kind of going into the quiet period. The summers are always a quiet period, and then we're going to head into the fall period where you're going to have some Israeli elections, and you're going to have a ramp up into the 2020 U.S. elections as well. And what takes the U.S. out of power? What puts them in such a position that they're not named, that they're not a big player in Ezekiel 38 and 39 or in Isaiah 17? What puts them in that position? It's going to be very interesting. And these last couple of years are going to be a mixed bag of things that are happening. I think the 7-year tribulation period, starts in or around the year 2021, based on Israel celebrating its 70th anniversary in 2018. And they are surviving by reason of strength through God until age 80, which ends in the year 2028. So there's a lot of interesting correlations and timeline events that are kind of lining up. And so it's interesting now that we see that, apparently there's a new alliance, Russia, U.S., and Israel against Iran. And again, I would suggest to you that Russia's playing a strategic role here. And while the U.S. still has power, while they still have significant military power, Russia's going to play along with them. As soon as the United States runs out of power, runs out of money, and I think it's going to be an economic collapse that causes it, because I think it's going to happen fairly quickly. And in fact, it has to happen in less than 2 years. Does the U.S. go bankrupt? Do we have a worldwide economic collapse, depression, which really catapults us and runs us right into end-time Bible prophecy in the space of a couple of weeks? I think that is very likely what's going to happen. And, the term all hell will break loose. I don't know if all hell will break loose, but it will be something akin to that phrase that we use where things are just spread up dramatically, and we have the world just shot into economic depression, chaos, war, civil unrest in a very, very short period of time. And they're talking about trouble like that on the economic front these days, the last couple of weeks. A lot of trouble going on. Trump is asking to lower interest rates, and the stock market is in a scary place right now, where it's purged or it's set up for a fall, set up for a collapse. It's perched, on the edge of a cliff, ready to go over the side, and we're just looking for effectively God's timing. God has all the timing known. He has it all set up. He knows exactly when it's going to happen. We don't, so we think it's going to happen sooner than later, or on such a date. God knows exactly when it's going to happen, and it's happening all in His timing. And all the players are in place right now in the Middle East. There's no country really. Maybe save China. Maybe there's some interaction in China where it speaks of the 200 million man soldiers, where China would have likely have to be in place to produce most of those foot soldiers. But there's speak of rivers being dried up, Euphrates being dried up, so that the armies from the east can march across. So you have all these things. And I think an economic collapse would really trigger all these sorts of events, and in rapid succession. So a lot of very interesting prophetic things. Revelation 8 speaks of the trumpet judgments, and I found this interesting timeline here. This is about the 7-year period. The first 3.5, I believe, are the tribulation period. The second 3.5, we're really getting into the judgments. That the Bible speaks of, and the second 3.5 in this information, this image here, show that the trumpet judgments are happening in the last half of the 7-year period. And so that's what we're going to be reading about from Revelation 8. It says, "And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. And the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. And they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burnt up," it says. And here comes the second angel. The second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. So you have, if you take this literally, you see some great mountain falling into the sea, burning. Almost sounds like an asteroid. Now, many have read this to be, or taken out of it, that maybe the mountain burning with the sea is Jerusalem. You know, it's built on a mountain, and it's been burned several times in the past, and it was maybe they say its downfall is kind of like being thrown into the sea, burning with fire. And there's been many other explanations, and maybe there are multiple ways to understand this, and multiple ways it will be fulfilled. If you take it at its face value, literally though, it seems to be that some great object as big as a mountain is going to be burning with fire, and it's going to be cast into the sea. And I think the literal aspect, I think the more you take the Bible literally, the more you're going to start seeing things that are actually happening, that are being fulfilled. And the more and more you take it literally, the more verses come alive and really make sense, and you can really see it coming alive and being literal. This is an interesting article from Breaking Israel News. Asteroid may hit the Earth, but scientists say not to worry. And look at this number, only 1 in 7,000 chance of a catastrophic impact. Isn't that an interesting number for odds, 7,000? That's very interesting to me. It says, astronomers have discovered a large asteroid on a trajectory that may hit Earth, but they assure us not to worry, as the chances of catastrophic impact is only 1 in 7,000. Again, interesting odds there, 7,000, 1 in 7,000. This would be exactly the definition, the literal understanding, really, of the Revelation 8 passage, where a mountain burning with fire is cast into the sea. An asteroid, it's burning with fire and big like a mountain, and it's cast in the sea. And it causes all sorts of physical damage, not just, spiritualized, Jerusalem or something, but this would really cause some problems. Asteroid 2006 QV89 has a diameter of 164 feet and will make its closest approach to Earth September 9th, 2019. Now, if this is the Revelation 8 trumpet event, and if that event is happening in the second half of the 7-year period, well, then this is not going to be it. But I would submit to you that something like this, I would kind of believe, would be the most accurate understanding of these. The more you take these verses literally, the more they come alive in a literal sense. And so this is happening September 9th, 2019. And there could be another one coming even bigger, even more of a mountain than this 164 foot diameter asteroid. It says, this astronomical near miss places QV89 at the 4th place on ESA's risk list. Though this sounds reassuring, it is the only object in the top 10 with a chance of impacting Earth this year. So you talk about fall period things, September events, and scares of humanity, and things that could trigger an economic collapse worldwide. If you have a major astronomical event like this, maybe hitting the Earth, that could be the kickoff of end time Bible prophecy. Scientists have known about the asteroid since it was discovered in 2006. It had 2 close approaches in the 1950s, then one in the 60s and another in the 70s, and 2 more in the 80s. There were 2 more close approaches by 2006 QV89 in 2003 and 2006. According to the ESA, after this year, it's set for another close approach in 2032, which, again, that's another interesting date range. I believe, the end of 7,000 Years of Man is 2028, but that could be, off plus or minus a couple of years. I don't think we have 50 years left on this planet based on the current situation in the world. But 2032, there you go. There's some people who think it's in that time range. And that could be the latter half of the 7-year period. We don't know until this happens. It says, for comparison, a meteor half the size of QV89 generated an air boost in Chelyabinsk, Russia in 2013, injured more than 1,100 people. So that's an asteroid half the size, meteor rather. The meteor was estimated to have an initial diameter of 17 to 20 meters and a mass of 10,000 tons. So we have these close encounters coming all the time, and I would certainly expect God to use his natural creation to bring upon judgment of man on this planet. And I think that's exactly what he's going to be using. He's going to be using literal events. I don't think he has to use the supernatural all the time, out of nothing. I think he uses his natural creation to judge man. Just like man has been causing problem for the natural creation, God uses it against man as well. And God uses supernatural sometimes in the Bible. God uses his people Israel to inflict wrath and judgment on other nations in Old Testament, for example. And God uses his natural world as well, just like the flood of Noah, where the mountains of the deep broke open and flooded the earth. So God uses all these things, supernatural, all the way right down to the natural world, to provide the wrath and provide judgment and to provide reminders for man that God is in control. And so this is a very interesting thing. Again, the trumpet judgments here shown in this latter half of the 7-year tribulation is something like this asteroid going to be that. Will this be a forewarning? Will this asteroid be a forewarning of things to come? And I think we're in store for a lot of exciting events, and exciting by definition, I mean maybe not that are happy, but things that are incredible, that will open our eyes, that we will be astonished and wowed of the power of God, and we will also be returned to a basic faith in God, either a faith or a blaspheming. We'll either say, God, protect us, you are the creator of the universe, and we ask for your protection, or we will blaspheme God, saying God's just trying to kill us all, and we hate God. And that's what a lot of people will do. Probably a majority of the people will blaspheme God. And in fact, in the end time Bible prophecy, it says that the sun is rather going to scorch men with fire. And what will the men do? Will they ask for protection from God, ask for relief, ask for salvation, recognize Jesus as creator? No, they will blaspheme God all the more as they are being judged, their attitudes completely solidified, if you will, against God. They hate God, and they will continue being like that. So we are in the last days, guys. Exciting events are coming upon us. We see world events shaping up, civil unrest on the doorstep, economic collapse on the doorstep, the Middle East, alliances, very interesting moves there. And I think the next big question is, Where is the United States in Bible prophecy? What happens to them? What happens to any Western nation? Because no current Western nations that are the big nations, Britain, Canada, Australia, where are all these big Western, civilized, if you will, Western nations in Bible prophecy? Something removes them. Something causes them not to have any effect or any comment on the situation in the Middle East. And you got to think that something big is coming for Western nations, and soon, which will open the doors, the floodgates for all the biblical events in the Middle East to really start moving. I think only when Western powers are taken out of the area, then you have Russia, China, and Iran a lot more willing to go against Israel. And in fact, Israel at that point pushed into a corner where they say, where they will say, well, we have no Western support anymore, so now we have to go against Iran ourselves, and now we have to make a big move with nuclear weapons ourselves because we have no backup at this point in time. So that's really the kingpin. When do Western nations get removed? How are they removed? And I said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll continue saying it. I think an economic collapse is the one thing that brings the whole world, that sets up the whole world, not just countries, individual countries, but sets up the whole world for end-time Bible prophecy, and really creates the need, if you will, for Russia to march on Israel, and creates the narrative. It's the one way to describe the situation that's told us in Ezekiel 38 and 39, Isaiah 17, where there are apparently no Western nations coming to the aid of Israel, and that's probably because they've been taken out by economic collapse. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll leave it there. We'll see you guys in the next video.